Hello, my name is Karen, and I am an occupational therapy student at Kaiser University's MS-OT Bridge program. As part of my virtual fieldwork experience, I am creating weekly YouTube videos regarding various topics. Part of this week's assignment was to create a video discussing what activity or intervention I could perform in the client's home that's using household supplies. As background information, we were tasked with selecting a movie and creating a plan of care for the main protagonist. My movie that I selected was A Beautiful Minds, making my client Mr. John Nash. Mr. Nash was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He lives with his wife and their young son, and he currently struggles with delusions and hallucinations. Part of my goals for Mr. Nash were to work on meal prep, with my long-term goal being that Mr. Nash will be able to prepare a simple cold meal for himself and his son without assistance in 4 weeks. To help meet this goal, I created several short-term goals, including one where Mr. Nash will be able to prepare a simple cold meal for himself with minimal assistance in 2 weeks. To work on this goal, I would have Mr. Nash either select a simple meal that he likes. I would ask him about his dietary preferences and then go from there for picking my meal selection for this activity. But for today's video, I'm just going to be making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Also, during my treatment session with Mr. Nash, this would take place in his kitchen or dining area, but for today, I went ahead and brought the supplies here to film in front of you. So the supplies I have gathered are going to be bread, I have my knife, jelly, peanut butter, and then a plate, napkin, or hard surface to work on. For this activity, I would have Mr. Nash gather the supplies for himself. While I am making my sandwich, which is performing the intervention activity, I'm going to be discussing the performance skills I'm targeting and also the client factors I'm targeting while working with this. This occupation is part of meal prep, which can be used in conjunction with feeding and also care of others. For Mr. Nash's case, it would be care of his son, and also if he wanted to care for his wife by preparing a meal for her. But the occupation targeted is going to be meal preparation. So the performance skills that I'm targeting for Mr. Nash are specifically going to be his process skills, not so much his motor skills. His biggest struggles are struggling with delusions and hallucinations. Physically, he's able to perform almost all ADLs without assistance from a physical component, but he sometimes forgets what he's doing. He has trouble staying on task, or he can get distracted by whatever delusions he's currently trapped in at the moment. So instead of assessing motor skills with Mr. Nash while he's doing this activity, I'm going to be assessing his process skills, including his ability to attend to task, to also heed instructions. So I would start by saying, Mr. Nash, today I'm going to have you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and see if he can run with those simple instructions or if he needs more prompting. First, gather the bread. First, gather this. I'm also going to be assessing his ability to use appropriate tools. Is he using a knife to make this sandwich, or is he using a spoon? Did he get a bowl? Is he gathering the appropriate tools and also using them in the correct manner? So for instance, with this knife, is he holding it by the handle or is he trying to hold it by the blade? I'm also going to be looking at sequencing. Is he appropriately putting the ingredients together before he puts them away, or did he put the peanut butter back in the cabinet before he put it on the bread? As I mentioned, I will also be looking at his ability to gather and organize supplies. Once the peanut butter is done, we're going to go ahead and do the jelly. Those two steps can be switched if preferred. And the client factors I'm going to be assessing with Mr. Nash are going to be primarily his body functions, and within the body functions, specifically his mental functions. So as I mentioned earlier, physically Mr. Nash is doing pretty good, but mentally I'm going to be assessing his functions, including his attention. Is he able to complete this task without getting distracted? I'm also going to be assessing his judgment. Is he getting out too much peanut butter? Is he getting out too little? And I'm also going to be assessing his orientation. Is he able to completely participate in this task without getting lost in a delusion? Is he able to remember where he is, what he's doing, what's going on? So that orientation throughout. And once he has his sandwich, he can go ahead and eat it. And the final thing I'll be discussing on this week's video is going to be how to grade this activity up or down. So, depending on how Mr. Nash is performing, I can grade this activity to be easier by pre gathering the supplies for him. I can also write down the steps or the recipe that would make it easier for him. I can have him perform this task from a seated position if he was struggling that day with endurance. And then to make it harder, I can hide some of the supplies, not in the living room per se, but put the peanut butter behind another ingredient in the cabinet. We can mix up the utensil drawer a little bit to kind of make it a little more challenging, so that presents the opportunity to work with visual scanning some more. I can also make this activity harder by increasing the number of sandwiches he has to prepare. So instead of preparing a meal for just himself, we can include his son. We can also include his wife. So that ups the ante from having to only gather 2 pieces of bread to either 4 or 6. I can also have him cut the crust off when making a sandwich for his son. So adding more steps into that activity would be a way to grade this activity up and increase the challenge for Mr. Nash. So as you saw with this, these were all simple supplies that I had in my kitchen. It does not take very long to perform this activity when there are no barriers in place. And this is something that, again, based on his preference, we could do another simple meal instead. But typically, to start off with, I would want to start with a meal that takes only 3 or 4 steps to prepare. So maybe making a bowl of cereal, making oatmeal, making a sandwich. Those kinds of things would be best for Mr. Nash when starting off with just our first short-term goal. Thank you so much for joining me this week.